what I did is I'm going to post.
Good morning. Hello, welcome to the CA Datacom Cadre Virtual Customer Technical Conference. We have up next Al Johnson, who's the site manager for MindCore. I'd like to ask everyone to please mute your lines at this time by doing a *6. And then at the end, when Al asks for questions to unmute, you can do #6. But right now, would everyone, except Al, please do a *6 so that you can mute your line. And go ahead, Al, take it away.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. In my opportunity to talk about the upgrade process, I guess what I wanted to do is I just emphasize that it's much simpler to get from 14 to 15.1 or 15.0, but there's no reason to go to 15.0. You can go directly to 15.1. And so the upgrade process has been made much, much simpler and more straightforward. And so this presentation is the same pretty much as it was at the last CTC conference, because the upgrade paths that were available from 14 to 15 are pretty much the same, going 14 to 15.1 or 15.0 to 15.1. And so what I'd like to do is just to review the process, and we'll just get into it from here. So anyway, there's a variety of installation messages. There's 3. There's the active, and then there's the traditional and the parallel, and we'll be covering each of those. There's also, for completeness, cover briefly at the beginning how to do a new install if you want to use the install JCL members to create another MUF versus cloning an existing environment. So the materials have been adjusted, and the focus is on going from 14 directly to 15.1. It does not get into going from 15 to 15.1. It's pretty much straightforward, but the emphasis needs to be anybody who's, or the focus needs to be anybody who's still running 14 needs to get off of 14 by the end of the year. And it's very straightforward to do so, very simple to do so. In fact, I was recently involved with a site that went from 14.0 to 15.1, and in conjunction with the Datacom going from 14 to 15.1, they were still running 11 of CICS services, IPC, and Ideal, and we took those from 11 to 15.1, all at the same time. So each upgrade of each of their environments went from a combination of 14.11 all the way to 15.1, and it was as smooth as could be. Didn't have any issues whatsoever. So the installation tasks, we'll talk about installation upgrade resources. That's pretty boilerplate, so I won't spend a lot of time there. That's just getting the environment set up. Installation programs, then the pre-installation considerations, that's important. So we'll be talking a little more in that area. And then we'll cover the actual installation procedures themselves. And then finally, maintenance. You know, once you get to the 15.1 platform, then it's very important, and you keep your software up to date so that you can avoid encountering any unforeseen problems. So the upgrade and installation resources available are either, well, the PACS files, and then there's the recommended services or CARS maintenance packages, which are, it might be quarterly now, so I didn't question if it's still monthly or if it's quarterly. But anyway, that could be a missed update. Then there's individual PTFS as needed. Hopefully you don't have to do that, but the reality is that if something breaks and you need to fix it, you can still apply an individual PTF. And then we'll talk about some documentation. This is from 14 to 15, actually it was from 12 to 14, but MSPS, Mainframe Software Packaging, they're all configured similarly. All the products are now. PTFs are object and source replacements. There are no zaps, so this is just a reminder. We are using SMP, or say we. Old habits are hard to break. SMPE error hold data is supported. It's recommended that you do use that. Source members under SMPE control. That means that the SAMP JCL data set that contains all of the upgrade members is SMP managed. So you want to make sure that you when you're making edits and changes, you don't do it in the SAMP JCL data set, because if you do apply maintenance that affects that data set, then your changes will be lost. Anyway, the last note, SMP target library contains a three-character product code. So in the case of Datacom DB, it's CABD, and if you're a Datacom AD implementation, it's CAAX. The other installation, traditional IBM SMPE. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time. Everybody should be familiar, I would think, with SMPE as far as maintaining the actual software itself. There's also the CA Technologies CSM, Core Software Manager. If you have used it, you're familiar with it, it makes maintaining your software much more straightforward, and it's easy to know what PTFs have been applied and which ones have not. So if you don't have CSM implemented in your environment, you ought to seriously consider it, because it really makes maintaining your environment much more straightforward. Pre-installation considerations. Very important. If you're still running 14-something, 1402, 14.0, 14.01, doesn't matter. You need to review the README solutions, because the README is a living document in a sense. It's available on the web, that if there are any changes to the procedures for getting from one version to the next, it will be documented there. And so it's kept up to date. So before you begin, you want to go and access the README and make sure that you've attended to anything that's identified there before you begin actually doing the upgrades. Review the installation manuals, be familiar with the steps involved. This presentation will go over them at a high level. Fill out the installation worksheets. Do your homework. If you're not familiar with the naming conventions of the various environments that you are going to be upgrading, then it's helpful to do the installation worksheet, because it will then tell you or remind you of which resources you're going to actually need to be working with during the upgrade process. SMPE, apply all available PTFs, as already mentioned, and review the hardware and software requirements. Just make sure you're compatible. The ZIOS level, the CICS level. IPC, it's required for DB and CA Common Services. When you're planning your upgrade, you want to verify that the CA Common Services is the most current version. That's because you're going to be having to install the PC call modules. That's the way the Datacom now communicates. CA Datacom runtime libraries must be APF authorized. Decide which upgrade method to use. We'll be covering all three of them, but primarily we're going to focus on the active. Traditional is really, and I'll get into it a little later, a variation of active. It's a very subtle difference, but anyway, I'll identify the differences. And then there's the parallel that we'll cover towards the end that really has become obsolete, more or less, because the requirement of converting the CXX is gone. And that's where the parallel upgrade became of value, because you could do your actual conversion of the system resources offline and then re-implement them at a later time instead of having to do the actual upgrade in place. But now you can do the upgrade in place. That's what active is. And so there's really not a good use for it unless you want to just take something offline for some reason and make some sort of test or change. The parallel JCL is an easy way to do that. Okay, and we'll talk about the other pre-consideration is your data dictionary, and there's the data dictionary compare utility, that's DDSDCLM. Should be run if you're at 14.0, 14.1, 14.2. You need to run that on each data dictionary. You can run that at any time, but you need to run it out of your 15.1 execution load library, but run it against the 14.0 data dictionary to make sure there are no outstanding issues from previous upgrades, because you want your dictionary to be clean going forward, and that's the whole purpose of this utility. So ensure any errors or all errors that are identified have been addressed before you begin your upgrade if you want to be sure to be successful. Here's just some sample control statements. You have to have the data dictionary sign-on. So obviously, if you don't have the default in your system, you need to use one of your own. Then there's the STC 14.0 prod to verify that the 14.0 structure of the data dictionary is valid. There's no errors. And then there's the verify. Companion products. Recommend, and that's what I said, I was fortunate enough to be involved in the site where this was actually accomplished, and we had no issues whatsoever. And that is, if you're not running current versions of IPC, Ideal, CICS services, or Mainframe server, then we suggest that you don't just upgrade Datacom from 14 to 15. Go ahead and consider bringing your IPC, Ideal, service facility, and servers all at the same time, because that way, typically, they all run out of the same load library, job lib, step lib, whatever link listed libraries. So if they are co-existent, they being the product code, in those libraries, it's simpler to just do them all at once. Now we'll cover the installation procedures themselves. Product installation, dataset creation, SMP, resource, and shared processes, which is more dataset creation. And so on a new installation, it won't spend a lot of time. But there is a new installation. There is JCL to create a brand new MUF. It's very straightforward, and I'll go through that process here in a moment. Then you have your upgrades. And in the upgrades I've already mentioned, you have the active MUF upgrade that was originally introduced with 15.0 and, of course, is valid for 15.1. You have your traditional path and then parallel. And we'll talk about some post-install and tailoring. Installation changes between the three versions. They're minor. They're minor member name changes. They're still recognizable as 14.0 names. There's far less of them. The naming convention is pretty much the same, but there's not as many involved in the process anymore. So it makes it much simpler to get through the process, and they run very quickly. So you don't have as long of a downtime as you traditionally had as going from 12 to 14. So this is pretty basic stuff. You want to download the product package. You want to copy the PAX file into your USS directory, create your ZSF, unpack the installation. The important part here is that when you are going to actually do the upgrade of the software on the mainframe, is that you need to have access to the SAMP JCL. Okay, it's in the CABD SAMP member, but it's the SAMP JCL data set. That's where all the JCL for doing installation and upgrades are located. It contains the SMP-related JCL numbers on the CABD SAMP. That the target library contains post-install JCL to create upgrade MUF, to either create or upgrade the MUF. So the SAMP JCL will have the SMPE. CABD SAMP will have the actual new and upgrade JCL numbers. So here's just a quick little visual of you download the package, you unpack it, it creates a SAMP JCL and the CABD SAMP. If you are going to be using the traditional SMPE method for creating your SMPE resources, the JCL members to do that are listed. I'm not going to cover them. They're pretty straightforward. There's an edit macro, allocate, create, and customize the CSI, receive, apply, and accept. So they're batch SMPE members. We recommend using in this particular data set, the member name is DCMS-edit, to universally change all of the install members so that you are consistent. And it's done with basically an ISR edit. It's to change all functions, just like TSO if you were to do it manually in the command line. But instead of having to type it over and over and over again or recall it and re-execute it, you can put it in this member and then just execute the member, and it will make all the changes at one time to each individual member as you're preparing to submit it. So that's why you must save it or need to save it in the sysproc or TSO CLES so that you can actually then in the command line execute the macro so that it will go and change each of the install members universally that you can then submit. We'll be talking about it a little more as we go. So select the first one. It's the DCM all, type DMS edit in the command line. That name can be whatever name you save it as, but so anyhow in this example, it's kept the same. It's DCMS edit. Anyway, submit the modified member and then cancel out of the modified member so that the changes are not permanent, because the SAMP JCL library is FMPE managed. So that's the whole point. So repeat. So it's a repetitive process. So here's a picture of what that looks like. If you execute the full set of members, what you end up with is the global zone, your target zone, and your distribution zones. So create the INSTL JCL and custom JCL libraries. This will be located in the CABD stamp. So if you open member BDCUSOO, that will have all of the macro assemblies that need to be tailored for each of the individual multi-user environments. We'll talk a little bit later about each of the different members that you have possibly or probably modified in some way for each of your individual multi-users that you're running. And you'll have to carry forward your customization into the new 15.1 release versions of those macros, the one-time versions of the macros. So 15.1 allocates and populates the following data sets. That's what the CUS00 does. It's the INST JCL, which has all of your upgrade JCL in it, the CUS Live, the CUS Mac, and the CUS Proc. Once you have allocated those new 15.1 libraries, then you can cancel out of your member. In the case of the INSTL JCL, the member that does the edits is called $DCB EDT. Anyway, it's got the worksheet, edit and save, and sysproc. Use your worksheet to modify it. Sysproc or TSLC list, etc. You can save it using a member name that relates to its use. That way it's easy if you refer back to it. So if you're upgrading a test MUF, then the name of the MUF is TST MUF, then you can call the member test MUF. Or if it's a QA MUF, you can call it QA MUF 1 or prod M or what. So I suggest that if you're going to use that macro, that you save it and use the MUF name, and that way you know what it's for. Select the first INST, enter test MUF in my example here, and JCL variables will be updated and submit the member, etc. So here's an example. It's just like the previous one for the SMPE. It has a change all in it, and here's the JCL default name in this. On the second would be what you want to change it to. So it's change it from CAI.newHLQ to whatever your actual high-level qualifier is. So that's establishing the software environment. You want to bring in your 15.1, you want to get it established, and from that point forward, you will be either doing a new install or you'll be doing an upgrade. As I mentioned, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on new installation. If you do choose to create them up with the new install JCL, I do want to point out that this will install or create the multi-user in full simplified mode. A lot of you running your existing environment may not have already transitioned to using Simplified in order to protect your system resources and isolate each MUF's resources from each other, which is a good thing to do. But if you do use this JCL to create a brand new MUF, it will be set up as a fully implemented Simplified configuration. So I just want to point that out. Anyway, you got your CABD SAMP, you have your INST JCL, and here's your members. You have your README, which is to install the PC call modules, and then you have your CUS new, which will populate your custom libraries for your new MUF. Here's what it looks like. It's very simple. So the custom is run to tailor the DDSys table, DQ outlets, etc. If you want the defaults, obviously you don't have to change anything. You just have to submit and run the member. Then you have your CUS new, and then your README PR to create your PC call, and that's what the PC CPR module is. So there's only one member, and it allocates all your data sets. Naming conventions, this is the high level 5 characters of the member names in the installed JCL dataset. If it's a BDCUS, then it's for customization. BDNews for new installations. BDUPG is for doing upgrades. IVP, for new installation is to verify that the install was successful, and IVUPG are test jobs to verify that the upgrade was successful. If you're going to be implementing CDC, there's a member or several members that begin with BDCDC. That's an optional feature. So this is the JCL to allocate and create all of the resources associated with change data capture. And then you have your BDRIM, which is to install the PC call modules. Well, module, used to be modules. So anyway, here's the BDNew allocates and populates. BDNew 2 does your VLS files. And here's a pictorial representation of what it's creating. So you have new 01, new 02, and it allocates all of these resources, and as well as the VLS files. I mentioned already that you must APF authorize your runtime libraries. If you have SysView, there is a member in the INST JCL dataset that will do that in a batch mode. It's APF ADD. If you don't have SysView, or you have a different organization that typically takes care of your APF authorization and linked lists, etc., then that will have to be taken care of at some point prior to doing the upgrade or completing the install. Now we'll move forward into the active MUF upgrade. This is really the main focus of this particular presentation, because this is what's really made everybody's life simpler as it relates to getting from one version of Datacom to the next. It's different from all prior version of upgrades. CXX now release independent. That's the big key difference. It supports access from version 14, 15, and 15.1. So there is no requirement to have to convert the CXX going forward or backwards. So if you want to go straight to 15.1, you can literally lay down the version 15.1 code and then substitute that code for the 14.0 or 15.0 libraries with a 15.1 and then start the MUF. And you'll be running a 15.1 MUF with 14.0 CXX and 14.0 data dictionary, or 15.0, whichever you might be currently running. When upgrading your dictionary, the following database resources can be open and active in MUF, and that's why this is referred to as an active upgrade. So if you're a true 24/7 shop, to where you cannot afford to have your multi-user down, and you need to course convert, do the changes necessary to the dictionary and the CX, well, primarily the dictionary and dynamic system tables and data query, you can do that, I'll call it on the fly. So you can change the data dicts, the DD and DDD and DSTs while MUF is up and active, even while the dictionary is open. So if you just have to have the ability to actually transition to 15.1 code. The MUF needs to be running at 15.1 level. Now, how you do that, there's, of course, two obvious ways, or I won't say obvious, there are two ways of doing that, and this is really now the traditional mode for MUF, and that is to recycle the multi-user. And to do that, you'll have to class or disconnect all of your application access and then restart it with the 15.1 libraries. If you are running some version of sorry, my mind just went blank, Shadow MUF, then you can use Shadow MUF to transition from your current version of Datacom to the 15.1. So you can either, if you're set up as a full, you can migrate, or you can do a passive, I'll call it, transition to the 15.1 code. And then after you're running the 15.1 code, change the actual CXX and data dictionary resources to the current versions by running the necessary upgrade jobs. The target MUF remains fully operational and available while upgrading the system resources. Already mentioned that. User applications continue to run at version 14 or 15 code level while MUF is running at 15.1. So in other words, there's no reason to have to change the JCL for your user applications if they're running from different libraries that have version 14 or 15 in them. Chance of fallback is minimized because of the the stabilization, I'll call it, of the CXX, to where it's now available across all 3 release levels. Okay. They do not need to be done at the same time, so updating the DDD, DST, or the data query DQM message table update. Only takes a few minutes, can be postponed if you're comfortable staying at release 15.1. So you don't have to do it at the same time as you bring the MUF up, is the point. You can do it a week later, 2 weeks later, you pick and choose. Active MUF involves the following data set members, so now this is basically the JCL involved. You have your CUS00 is in the CABDSAMP JCL, and the rest of the upgrade JCL members are in INST JCL. So you modify and execute your custom assemblies. Make sure that you do the customization as necessary for the MUF involved, and it'll create the CUSMAC, CUSLIVE, and CUSPROC data sets with your unique settings in them for those macros. Then it'll also create the INST JCL data set. You would then customize the members there, and in the case of the active upgrade members, that's the BDCUSOO for active. And you also have to run README PR to install the PC call modules. That will need to be run in any environment on any LPAR where you're going to access them up. So if you are accessing MUF through ENF or remotely in any way, then you'll have to run the README PR on each of those domains or each of those LPARs. The active upgrade dataset JCL members, here they are again. CUS upgrade, here's your 15 data dictionary comparative utility. Do not proceed until all identified issues addressed. And then your ACT ALC to allocate backup data sets and to populate the CUSPROC. And you have your DD1 upgrade, DD2 upgrade members. So it upgrades the 14.0 CXX DDD databases, upgrades 14.0 DD to 15.1. Then you have the DQ, DQM, the messages, and the sign-on panel. Upgrade DST database to 15.1. That's the dynamic system tables. So here are the numbers in total that you need to execute to upgrade to 15.1. As you can see, it's many, many, many fewer than what it used to be. And this is for the active upgrade. If for some reason you needed to fall back for continuity and completeness sake, you wanted to go and put your 14.0 data dictionary back after going to 15.1, we do back all up your original resources. As I said, the focus here is going 14 to 15.1. So these are the members that would go ahead and restore your earlier releases. Obviously, these are backups. So if you were on 15.1 for any period of time and you made changes to your 15.1 data dictionary, then those changes will not be reflected because these are just restores of the 14 resources. So here's a picture of it. So that you know what version of Datacom you're actually running when you start your MUF, here's the traditional startup messages that will tell you that. It's the 00215I message, and in 15.1 it tells you it's 15.1. If you're running version 14 or 14.2, it'll tell you what version you're currently running. So when you start your MUF with the 15.1 load libraries, it will tell you you're running MUF Datacom DB at 15.1. Okay? Same thing with the SQL if you have the SQL opt-in. It will tell you that you're running the SQL version. There's some additional, as far as startup message to tell you which version of the data dictionary you're running. Once you convert to 15, and I'm not sure, I didn't update these messages, if it says 15.1 when you're at 15, or if it still says 15.0 either way, because I don't believe there's any difference in the dictionary between 15 and 15.1. So if it's 15.1, it'll tell you 15.1. So that's the main focus there, is that you do basically the upgrade in 2 steps. The first step is to get the code, 15.1 code, active in the multi-user. Once you've accomplished that, by either recycling the multi-user or migrating via Shadow in some method, then you would then upgrade the system resources using the member supply to do that while the MUF is up and active. Now, obviously, you would, if you're going to use the active, it's recommended that you do it at a quiet period of time, not, you know, in the middle of your business day. So you would probably still want to do it sometime on the weekend, but there's no requirement to take anything offline. So if you're a 24/7 shop and you have users connected all the time, there's no reason that they have to stop for anything while you do the actual transition to the 15.1 dictionary and system table and data query files. If you want to still use the traditional method, there's really a very minor difference now between active and traditional, in that the traditional now, instead of quickly transitioning or recycling them up so you're only down a minute and you're back up under 15.1 and now you go and change the system resources, if you want to do it in a traditional manner of saying, well, I have the luxury of being offline for 15 minutes, and that's probably all it's going to take you to do, you can then take the traditional approach, which means that you will, when you shut them up down to put in the 15.1 code, you would then bring up and run the actual traditional steps to convert the resources to 15.1 and then connect all the applications back to the MUF. So it'd be a question of just disconnecting application access, changing out the load libraries, converting the system resources, and then reconnecting the users. That's what traditional is. And it's so much straightforward now than it used to be. That's still a very viable way to do it. The site that I mentioned that we did successfully upgrade, we used the traditional method. And so the downtime, including system checkout, was just right at about an hour. And that was for them to verify, validate, certify that all the applications were functioning as expected. There were no issues. So here's how that goes. I think pretty much everybody's familiar with traditional because that was the only way to do it up until 14 to 15.0. The two new methods of parallel and active were introduced at that time. So the upgrade dataset process is very similar to what I've already described. We've got the cust00 member, allocates the libraries just like it did for the active, and it populates those with the macros custom. So this is doing assembles and links. So if you do have changes to the primary system macros, DDSys table, DQOP list, etc., this is where you want to go ahead and make those changes. Modifying the JCL numbers is the same as I've already described. Assemble the cust-mac macros and link edit them into the CA cust log. BDCUSOO upgrade members need to be reviewed and updated for the MUF being upgraded. So here's the macros, it's the sys-ID, sys-table, op list, and master list. So here's a visual of the jobs involved. You got the cust upgrade, modifies the custom members with your changes for your particular MUF, then the verification utility for the compare utility for data dictionary, and then your RIMPR, that's to install the PCC call module. Now the actual upgrade members themselves, very similar to traditionally as it's been in the past. You have B UPG members, you have 01, 03, you have B if you have data query. If you don't have data query, you don't need to use B. That's been the convention for as long as I can remember, that the suffix of B is for data query. R is for restores, if you need to for any reason, and then an 04 member for shutting down your 14.0 MUF. Now in the traditional, there is what Ken Eaton likes to call a skinny MUF, but it's basically a multi-user that doesn't have logging recovery active and so on and so forth. The whole purpose of the MUF is it's set up specifically to bring up a multi-user under the new code level in order to accomplish the dictionary changes and the dynamic system changes, etc. And so it doesn't have any of your startup options in it. It's just a very straightforward basic MUF to accomplish the upgrade. I mean, here are the steps, 06, etc. It's B, 7 is the backups, 8 shuts it down, and it's also the VLS file upgrades, adds the sign-on panels to the VLS files, etc. And that's it. oh, I'm sorry, it shuts down the MUF, and then we have VLS upgrade. So here they are in total. And I said to run all of these members, JCL's already been tailored, and you're just submitting and executing them. It's, you know, it's very quick. It's a matter of 5–10 minutes. That's it. Post-install. There are some things you need to do in order to configure your CICS. You have a member called BDCUSOO, and it's the CICS CSD members. This can be done ahead of time, and you can create a new CSD entry for the 15.1 environment that your CICS system programmer could then, when you are using traditional, you disconnected or shut down your CICS, they could be putting in as new CSD members while you're running the upgrade. So that when you're done, all it is a question of restarting CICS. If you want to put in change data capture, don't suggest that you do it during the upgrade, but anytime as a post-install, then there's a member to do that. I already mentioned it. So it's in the INST JCL, and it's referenced here. BK01 is not used. BK2, MUF startup placeholder, that's to bring your 14.0 MUF back up. Restore the dynamic system tables back to your previous version. DDO assign and sign-off panels to your previous version, etc. If you're falling forward, then it's the reverse. Okay. Again, these messages are the same as what I showed you in the previous, but for continuity, since we're talking about traditional versus inactive, if your folks come back to this material, these are the message differences. Okay, so we already discussed them. All right. A parallel MUF upgrade. As I mentioned earlier, this was very valuable if you had a lot of multi-users and you wanted to ensure that the upgrade procedure, when, for example, going to 12 to 14, this was a very viable option because it gave you the opportunity to take and back up an existing multi-user, 12.0, load it up into a standalone upgrade environment, and then actually process the upgrade in parallel to the original environment or source environment while it's still connected and servicing your applications. And there you would find out if you had any issues with the dictionary or what have you, and if you did identify issues that need to be addressed, then you had the latitude to go ahead and either address them there or identify what will need to be done if you were going to run this in a traditional method. So you're just doing a test run or a dry run of the upgrade. It's also set up, however, if you can freeze the environment that you have pulled over into parallel, there are steps or procedures to do an implementation of the now upgraded resources. So it would be a question of backing up your 14, putting it into this parallel upgrade MUF, and then putting it back as 15.1. So these are the steps to do that. It's kind of obsolete now, but it's still available if that's something that would be of use. Even to just create a temporary environment to do some sort of special testing. And if you have an old environment and you want to convert it, you can. Anyway, so it's simple process to similar process to traditional. So you have a source MUF and a target MUF, the source being the old version, the target is being the one where you want to create the new version. So most effective on 14 to 15.1 upgrades. It is effective for 14 to 15.1. Anyway, I'm not going to cover all of these. May or may not have to freeze on source MUF, freeze on DD changes for some period of time. So in other words, the main resource that you cannot allow to be changed would be database definition changes. And if you are an SQL environment and you're an active SQL environment, you have to be aware of the fact that you could be having plans dynamically rebound in the DDD during the period of time that you are in the parallel MUF making your changes. So that would be a case-by-case decision on whether you can implement back into the original MUF or not, depending on what kind of situation you have with respect to SQL. Back up the target, CXFDD, and load them into the source MUF 15. So once you have done the conversion in your parallel environment, it takes backups and then just simply loads them into the 15.1. That was the real benefit in the 12 to 14 world, was because you got to run all the upgrade steps, which traditionally took lots longer because the DD update ran for a while, et cetera, and you eliminated all of that runtime and changed it into a simple load of DB utility or DB utility load of these resources, which most of you know that to load a CXX, a DG, and DDD, it's a matter of a few minutes versus could be, you know, several minutes or 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour if you're actually running all of the upgrade steps in place. So it made the transition much faster. But now that you have the active option, you basically are doing the same thing. So that's why I said parallel is almost obsolete, but it's still there if you have a need for it. So the parallel upgrade date is 10. It's very much the same as what you've already seen. You have the cust member. You create and populates these guys. So regardless of the method you pick, the steps are pretty much the same. You have your INST-JCL members. They're the same, except you have a P to populate the upgrade MUF cust procs. Those minor differences if you're using parallel. And that's because you're actually upgrading or populating a different environment set of resources. You're not doing it in the original source. You're doing it for target. You're doing it in the parallel world. Your INST-JCL members are all set as cust, UPG. That creates the cust mat, cust live. Then you have these members UTL, B, and L for backup the target MUF system data sets. Those would be the 14.0, and load the target MUF data sets. That would be back at 15.1. So here's how that looks. You back up these resources with the D backup data set. Then you run the L to load. So here's your upgrades, very much like a traditional upgrade, except you're doing it offline. You're doing it in a separate environment from the original source. So that's therefore the parallel part. Okay. So here's what it looks like. Oh, I missed an edit. That's for 15, should be 15.1. So the parallel upgrade implementation phase. So once you've actually done the conversion, the pre-upgrade of the INS members, it's called cust IMP. It allocates and populates an IMP, INST-JCL. That's for doing the re-implementation of your converted or your upgraded resources that are in the parallel environment back into the original. So again, you have to do the custom assemblies of what the original, you had to do the custom assemblies for your parallel to do the upgrade. Now you have to redo those assemblies for the real side. And that's what the cust00 does here. Then you do the implementation step, and of course you do the PC calls. Oops, I missed another edit. I need to remove that second one. That went away with 15.1. And so you shut down all user application access to your 14.0, which disconnect all your access so you can get stable backups is basically what you need to do. They need to be not backed up while they're open and active. They need to be stable. So you will have to close 2 and 15. Those are the defaults or whatever yours are in order to get the clean backup. Again, that can be done at the quiet period, and then just reopen them back up to the world because then you're going to do everything else in parallel. Start up and reconnect the user application. So this is, in a nutshell, what it takes to implement the parallel upgrade MUF. I mean, to re-implement the MUF that you upgraded in parallel. So there are the steps. And again, the messages are the same. Tell you what version you are running of both MUF code and dictionary versions in system table. Very important that you don't let your system get too old. We highly recommend that you keep it as current as possible. So keep the 15.1 healthy by using one of the following maintenance strategies. Download and apply each success card solution set. Receive them all, but do not apply until you need them. All right. Frequently download error HOLDDATA because if any of the PTFs needed to be modified, then the error hold data will keep you from implementing a PTF that has been adjusted. I'll be nice. And therefore, you won't be putting on incomplete maintenance. Do regular review of available CSO solutions, download and receive them on a regular basis. Using Shadow MUF to implement maintenance, it's recommended because what it allows you the opportunity to do, if you run Shadow regressed one from the current, so for example, if you are currently running 14.0, you're going to 15.1, and you go ahead and upgrade to your 15.1 in your multi-user, either by active or by a traditional method, doesn't matter. What would be best is to go ahead and restart your previous version, because remember, the dictionary wasn't changed yet, especially in active. It's still 14.0. So you have a MUF running the 14.0 code in the 14.0 data dictionary, but it's the Shadow MUF. And the reason you do that is so that in case there is an issue for some period of time, you can run that way with the 15.1 MUF, and it fails, then the Shadow will take over and you will be regressed back to your original code prior to your upgrade. Going forward, once you're happy with 15.1, then you can go ahead and run both the Shadow and 15.1 at the same level. But when you're ready to put in maintenance, you would now put the maintenance in the primary 15.1 multi-user and let Shadow run a -1 level. So again, if some PTF does cause an issue and you lose your multi-user, you will automatically regress to the prior maintenance level by Shadow just taking over at the prior maintenance level. So it's the best practices. And that's basically what this is trying to point out, is that this is what we recommend you implement this strategy going forward if you haven't already done so. So hopefully I've done a sufficient job of explaining your installation upgrade options, your choices, recognize the members and libraries that you will need depending on which version or strategy you pick, whether it be active, traditional, or parallel, and keeping the environment healthy by applying maintenance on a regular basis, and looking at changing to utilizing the Shadow MUF as a way to protect yourself, I guess, in implementing the maintenance. If you already have the ability to migrate to the Shadow, that makes this real simple. If you don't have that methodology, you have the failover issue, but it's still recommended that that's what you do.
Okay, if anyone has any questions for Al, be sure to do pound 6 to unmute, and we have just a minute or two for quick questions. Sorry, what's the latest in last? I know.
Well, I was able to finish 2 minutes early.
Okay, well good. I guess there are no questions. So thanks everybody for attending, and we'll be starting the next presentation at the top of the hour. Bye-bye.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you, Al.